Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well and is safe at their end. The topic of today's discussion uh, itself revolves around something that we are currently facing and very much in the domain of transfer pricing, what we need to think through while addressing the global pandemic of COVID-19. I welcome you all. Uh, we had our organizers from SICC, Mr. Shiv Prasad Lad, and we also had our special guest with an opening remark, Mr. Anil Kudar. Uh, Unfortunately, because of certain technical glitches uh, with the team's webinar, they are not able to present their views in front of you. However, I'll try to cover up along with Suraj in terms of how do we look at transfer pricing uh, as a subject and what steps the business, you as a business needs to undertake uh, during this pandemic to sail through and navigate the uncertain and difficult waters of transfer pricing in the near future. So global businesses ideally are done without boundaries. Nowadays, the supply chain are scattered throughout the world as multinationals would want to enjoy the best expertise jurisdiction wise. What I mean is, if you think about India as a jurisdiction, you will obviously think about India as a service provider jurisdiction to the world with so many BPOs and KPOs spread throughout. Similarly, when we speak about China, we perceive China as a global manufacturer. In short, global businesses which are spread across the world are not centralized. This helps the global businesses from a risk mitigation point of view because they are diversified, and diversification significantly brings down the risk of concentration in one jurisdiction. This pandemic, for the first time in the world, I'm just leaving out the times of war, showed that there could be certain risk of decentralization also. Economies, global economies really got impacted at different intervals and at different times. First, the wave spread across China. It went to Italy, USA, Brazil, say, then I think UK, India was almost one of the last impacted economies somewhere in the month of last August, September. It went back as a second wave to US and UK and then to India very recently in March and April. In such cases, multinationals who are situated at various locations had to turn on and off their business switches several times based on the lockdown criteria in the respective countries. This led to disruption of supply chain and ultimately the supply. Even companies like Apple had to face shortages in the month of, say, from October till I think Jan is what I remember, due to international policy pressures which were resulting out of the pandemic. So ideally, the difference between an Apple or a normal business is that Apple as a very strong company and a global company has certain level of buoyancy to absorb the impact of disrupted supply chain, which may not be true with all other businesses. In addition to supply chain disruptions, the lockdown brought in reduction in demand, and the demand mainly focused on the essentials, and all the other commodity demands were down. As a result, from a multinational's perspective, it led to cash disruptions and cash crunches. The idea in the multinational world, which was more growth in cash and growth in the investment that is made, shifted from growth to conservation of cash. When survival became a key, many businesses restructured themselves to pivot their efforts towards new business models. Just to give you some examples, I think global universities that always believed in in-campus education now quickly shifted their attention to online education. And there are so many global universities which are currently providing online education in India, which ultimately gave rise to multiple transfer pricing issues, but most interestingly, issues of also digital taxation and equalization levy. So I think with changing dynamics, we are seeing a lot of changes happening worldwide at the MNC level, and surely transfer pricing will be one of the impacted topics in this. Moving ahead, I would like to set a quick context to today's discussion. One promise I can make to all of you is that I am going to keep the entire discussion very practical and simple. We being transfer pricing guys, we like to use complex language, but my promise to you today is I'll be as simple as possible in terms of giving my thoughts across. While doing so, we are going to cover certain important aspects on the transfer pricing structuring levels. We will do a deep dive into the concepts of comparative analysis. We will also speak specifically about the COVID related costs. Uh, I think we'll give you a good perspective on various financial transactions and the implications that transfer pricing has on these financial transactions. A very interesting thought on the contractual or intercompany agreements review, because that's very important at this stage. And last but not the least, certain views on the advanced pricing agreements that are already entered into, and maybe some of the taxpayers are looking at entering into those advanced pricing agreements. So let's look at some important variants that would be present in various transfer pricing structures. But before that, let's ask a very important question here, that whether the arm's length principle, which is highlighted by the transfer pricing law, still holds good in the pandemic situation. Now, the answer to that is simple, but the implementation of that may not be so simple. The answer is yes, the arm's length principle holds good. The reason is the study of transfer pricing is a principle based study, and it's not like any other law, which is very much rule based. The study involves a lot of judgments. It involves a lot of thinking through and analysis of the business situations, which are very dynamic. So when we are looking at a transfer pricing study for an industry, in an industry, pandemic has impacted most of them. Now the impacts could be either positive impacts or negative impact. For example, technology companies have had a tremendous positive impact on pandemic. But from a TP point of view, most of the taxpayers' peers would show similar characteristics and results when it comes to their pricing and their profitability. So transfer pricing is all about comparability and benchmarking yourself with the right set of comparable companies in similar situation which are independent. So in pandemic situation, if your industry is impacted, most of your comparative industries would also be impacted in similar fashion, which gives a very strong justification of why the arm's length principle would still hold true in various transfer pricing modeling and structuring. TP as a subject itself is very judgment based, and I think the issues in TP will start cropping out almost 3 years down the line when transfer pricing would be challenged by the tax authorities, which was undertaken at the time of pandemic. So I think a lot of judgment and a lot of you would say understanding would be needed at that point of time, because 3 years later, you can always take or understand or think through a business decision as a consequence. But when you are actually functioning in the uncertainty of that particular business, and when you are navigating that particular difficulties, your way of decision making could be different than what you would have done post or post facto. So the tax authorities and administration should keep this in mind while auditing any arm's length principle at the time of pandemic. And most importantly, as I said earlier, we should look at finding comparable situations to compare ourselves which have got impacted in the similar fashion. So today, in terms of modeling, I'm going to look at two main type of model buckets. When I say model buckets, these are the type of models which are there, which involves many other companies and functions of one particular uh, type. So let's take more of a routine entities which have limited returns. And I think the existence of such entities is quite prominent in India. So these are typically the subsidiary companies of the foreign parent company, and their return is almost assured or the return is limited. Is the way how we look at it. In such a bucket falls various other companies like a limited risk distributor, maybe a contract manufacturer, especially with the Make in India and the new manufacturing tax. You can see a lot of manufacturing getting emphasis in India. And there are so many contract manufacturing or captive manufacturing units which have been set up by the parent companies through their subsidiaries in India. India is very prominent in IT, ITS, BPO and KPO type of services. So we'll look at this as one particular bucket, and the other bucket that we'll try to address in a model is completely the opposite. So either it could be a subsidiary oriented model or maybe a parent entity oriented model, but this is more of a high risk entrepreneur or a high risk distributor model. So these are the two different buckets that we are going to talk today. I think 70 to 80% of our industries would fall under these two, right? So let's address the routine entities first. Suraj, I think let's go back. Yeah, thanks. So let's try to understand the routine entities first. The routine entities basically would make limited or routine profits, and ultimately any impact of pandemic on such routine entities will need to be considered in terms of the risk that they undertake. Now, how will we find the risk? The risks are found in either the function asset risk analysis, which is maintained as a substance document by the taxpayer, or the contractual reviews. I'll try to make it simple. Let's take an example of a distributor who is selling goods in India. Now, if the distributor is responsible for the demand in India, which is, I would say, marketplace risk, then any losses on account of such demand variances could belong to the limited risk distributor in India. However, any risk which is assigned to the foreign company, just because there is a pandemic, cannot be taken over by the distributor unless and until it is specified either in the contract or the FAR. Your past FARs is also going to be a very relevant documentation to prove this. Similarly, if a distributor has inventory risk and because of fall in demand, that entire inventory has gone bad. Now, in such a case, the cost of outdated inventories cannot be put onto the distributor. Same is also the case with utilization risk, and same is also the case with any other expenditure around COVID or COVID situations. There is a difference between limited risk distributors or limited risk manufacturers versus no risk distributors and manufacturers. Limited risk definitely carries some amount of risk, whereas a no risk won't carry any amount of risk. Accordingly, the remunerations are agreed for. And that's why if there is a question where limited risk distributors can make a loss, the answer is yes, a limited risk distributor can make a loss. However, a proper factual understanding and a documentation is very important in this case. Another important aspect in terms of routine entities, when everything was good in routine entities, most of us would be using a transactional net margin method, which is the net profit level based method. Now you might think of, because most of your cost and inefficiencies would come below the gross profit margins, which is affecting either the administrative distribution and the sales cost. It makes sense to compare your entity's transaction of purchase of said materials at a gross level instead of a net level. So this is something as one strategy that you can adopt only for the year of pandemic. You go back to the gross margin levels and you look at gross margins instead of net margins, but give proper justifications there, right? And whenever you're looking at any change in strategies from the entire transfer pricing model perspective, we need to keep in mind this change is going to be short term or long term. Short term changes could be accepted, easily digested. But if you are trying to use the reason of pandemic to undertake a long term change, your change could result into restructuring of a transaction. And by restructuring, it might mean that there could be certain tax implication to such restructuring. So we should keep all of this in mind while addressing the transfer pricing of routine entities from a modeling perspective. I'm still not on comparables, I'm just on the model as such. Let's further our discussions onto the high risk models, or maybe entrepreneurial models. There is a common understanding and a phrase: higher the risk, higher the reward. Similarly, when you have higher the risk, you also have a higher possibility to make a loss, because you are carrying all the risk of all the other associated enterprises and the business on your shoulder. And that's the reason why an entrepreneur is generally remunerated at, I would say, a profit which is residual profit, and he's not given a remuneration upfront. Therefore, an entrepreneur will always look at, say, incurring certain cost for the group, and also possibly taking over the cost because he's taking the risk for that cost. Having said so, it's important for a taxpayer to delineate the abnormal and exceptional cost that an entrepreneur has undertaken in the COVID situation. And a proper documentation and justification needs to built in why such a cost should be absorbed by the taxpayer for that particular period, with a proper, I would say, a position note and document with him and present it to the tax authorities, because the costs are not incurred due to transfer pricing, but any other reasons outside the transfer pricing domain, which were not in the control of the taxpayer. An entrepreneur can also look at reallocation of certain COVID related costs, maybe to the other associated enterprises. But at this point of time, it's important to build in a matrix for reallocation based on the risk profiles. Right. Let's move our discussion to the comparability analysis. I think we have gone in a good amount of depth in this. And there are several points to look at from a taxpayer's point of view. So the first point I would like to make here is that when you are going to document specifically for the pandemic years, the focus here needs to be on a global master file. So let me explain you what a master file is. Master file is a result of the BEPS project of G20, which was given to OECD, and in that the transparency pillar, it was suggested that at a group level there is one master file that is maintained, which could act as a mirror to all the significant transactions that the group has entered into in the entire year. So that is divided into significant financial transactions. There are significant intangibles, the significant implications of intangibles, top supply chains. Uh, in short, it gives an entire thesis on the transfer pricing health and the business health of the entire organization at one place. Okay. India has also adopted the aspects of global master file, and I think global master file could act as a fantastic starting point for various comparability analysis, because it can showcase how your company has functioned over the past year. And this global master file is generally maintained at the HO level, which could be filed in various formats at the constituent entity or the other local entity level. You can also justify it through certain budgets which are documented in that, certain, I would say, uh, uh, targets that you were supposed to achieve but were not able to achieve. All those things could form a part of justification around the global master file. Coming to the next point, I think this is one of the most important points for today's discussion, but over the years has been the most underrated ones. It is called as industry overview. This is generally the second or the third section in a transfer pricing study report, which is the local file. And many a times, either from a tax administration point of view or the taxpayers point of view, this is not even considered important or even read. But high time now, because this would be the most relevant section of your transfer pricing study, where you would need to build justification around your industry and how the pandemic has impacted your industry. Gone are the days when you were copy pasting, or there was a practice of copy pasting and changing the years over a time frame for an industry analysis, or just a copy paste from somewhere else. I have seen industry overviews uh, which talks about that the industry is doing very well, but at the end the taxpayer is trying to justify the lower profit margin. So that doesn't gel well. So your industry overview and your transfer pricing justification needs to be on similar lines. I'll give you an example. If you are trying to do an industry overview of automobile industry, so you are not just testing the automobile industry, you are also testing the infrastructure around, because your cars will be running on a road. So if your roads are bad, possibly from a human behavior point of view, a person would like to postpone the decision of taking cars. That particular industry overview can also go to an extent that there were no workers available at the time of lockdowns, and that's why the roads were not repaired, and because of that the sale of car was impacted. I'm just giving an example, but this is the depth that you can go to justify what has happened in your industry and your related industries. So hospitality industry could be one of the best industries to have a reference with. Airline industry another. All related industries into, say, sports industry, education industry, all these industries would need industry overview to be justified very well to present themselves before the tax administrator. The next point is around the independent party behavior, which assumes significance in the transfer pricing study itself, because every time, even if you go through the OECD transfer pricing guidelines or the OECD guidelines on COVID, they all talk about that a related party or an associated enterprise should behave in a manner how an independent party would have behaved in the given circumstances. That's why if you are taking any decision between the associated enterprises, then that decision should match how an independent party would have behaved in that particular circumstance. Giving an example, if you are a distributor in India who is purchasing certain trading goods from your associated enterprise and selling it to an independent enterprise in India, if your customer is asking you some additional credit period for the sales that you have made, so instead of 30, he is asking you a 90 days credit. It cannot happen that your credit period with your associated enterprise stays and remains intact. That credit period has to align itself to the independent party behavior in such a case. Otherwise, the Indian company will face cash crunch, and there could be possibilities of imputation of interest on delayed receivables too, if there is no back to back. Of course, risk allocation and thinking through in terms of accounts receivable and also the risk on funding needs to be evaluated here. But the point I want to drive here is independent party behavior is something that we need to look at in this case. Let's move on to a very important point, which is on availability of comparable data at the present moment. Now, while we are already in pandemic, the availability of real-time data for comparability is becoming a challenge. The reason is, these are dual reasons. One is because industries are doing late compliances. They are filing with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs late, and that's why the availability of information in the databases that the transfer pricing world relies upon is delayed. The second point is, even if there is an information which is available in a public domain, but it is still not available in a public database because of lockdown effects on the entities which provide databases, right? So these are dual, I would say, issues in terms of availability of real-time databases. Now, therefore, it becomes difficult in situations like pandemic to arrive at a conclusion on certain data which is dated 2018 and 2019, because the situation of industry at that point of time would be much different than what it is today. I mean, when I say much different, it could be good, it could be bad, or it could be stable, but that needs to be evaluated. And that's why there are two main approaches to transfer pricing. One is the price setting approach and another is the price testing approach. India as a country follows a price testing approach from a law perspective, but when you go for assessments and audits, the tax administrations ask for the price setting methodology. And at that point of time, a taxpayer is expected to maintain documentation around setting of prices and also the testing of prices. Now, I think more reliance needs to be put on the price testing approach than setting approach, because currently we do not have information on a real-time basis to set our prices on. Any type of price setting happening today will need to think through the adjustments that could be undertaken, or the way how industry has maneuvered over the year 2020 and 21. So, and accordingly do certain economic adjustments and arrive at a figure, but also document that to prove your price setting over the years. Another thought could be, instead of using, say, one method of comparability, use more than one method of comparability. Nobody forces a taxpayer to only use a transactional net margin method. It's the most appropriate method is what is needed, and at one point of time there could be two different set of methods which is considered as most appropriate. So you might like to defend a particular case under TNMM and back it up under CUP, or use a resale price method as preliminary and also look at CUP or any other method. So you can try to build up your case and justify your case with more than one method, which solidifies your documentation and stance before the income tax authorities. Another thing that we can look at is undertake certain economic adjustments. So if there is a certain capacity that is already deployed, and if you are using only 20% of the capacity, there are certain fixed overheads that are not getting absorbed, and such fixed overheads could be seen, and a capacity utilization adjustments could be undertaken. Similarly, adjustments for abnormal cost, which are COVID related cost, or maybe delays in working capital, extension of working capital could be undertaken. So try to work around economic adjustments which are easily digestible and which could be justified. Don't just stretch your imagination to an extent that in every case you are doing an economic adjustments. Economic adjustment should have certain justifiable base. Also, I have certain recommendations to the tax administrations that they should, 3 years down the line, when possibly TP would be going under the online assessment method and a faceless method. At that point of time, while you are absorbing a lot of information from the assessee, the tax administration should also show a little bit of flexibility with the testing approach. It show the little bit of flexibility around the industry and the justification that the taxpayer has built in. So the level of rigidity or the level of aggressiveness could be just tuned down a little bit, at least for these 2 years, so that the ease of doing business with India would just go up, at least during the time of pandemic. This is something that is my humble suggestion to the tax authorities. Another suggestion to the tax administration, which something is we don't have currently built in our law, is possibilities of undertaking any price adjustments at this point of time, which means that because of pandemic, my parent company, so I'm a cost plus entity, my parent company, which is situated in the USA, is not able to give me enough profits for year 2021. However, when the situation improved in 21-22, the profits were made available to the Indian company. So instead of a cost plus 15, my US company supported me with a cost plus 5 so that there is no cash crunch happening at the India level. The differential amount of 10 as a transfer pricing adjustment is given and deferred in the next year, in addition to the next year's cost plus 15. In such a case, across the years, there is something called as deferment of revenue that is happening. Currently, deferment of revenue is considered as a GAR topic, which is general anti-avoidance topic, and any deferment of revenue is considered as avoiding of taxes. I think some thinking through needs to be done and undertaken through tax administration, and some type of guidelines should be made available where the flexibility could be built in, that if you are not able to meet, say, a cost plus 15, there could be a possibility of undertaking certain price adjustments over the years. So that's just a humble suggestion if the tax administrations could pick it up from here. Another point on comparability, which is important, is analysis of factual conditions vis-a-vis the contractual terms that is entered into. So the business that you are doing should match the legal framework in the way how you are doing the business. So your transfer pricing study is a substance document. It should meet the legalities of the transaction, which is agreed in an intercorporate agreement. So in case there are some changes in the substance documents, that should get reflected also in the contractual terms. And I think this is a point which will be covered more in detail by Suraj going forward. But such type of an analysis is a very important analysis to be undertaken from a TP point of view. On a comparability basis, we were always harping on a multiple year data. I mean, the tug of war between the taxpayer and the tax authorities have been ever since, I think, 2005, when the taxpayer is always insisting on a multiple year data and the tax authorities harped upon single year data. I think after 2014, a flexibility was brought in and a multiple year concept was also incorporated in the law. Now we use a multiple year data. Now, when we are looking at a multiple year data, the data that we are going to select for financial year 21, it is going to be financial year 18, 19, 19, 20 and 21. Some of the details may not be available. That means we are again relying on multiple years of 18 and 19 or 19 and 20. In such a case, your margins that are made in financial year 2021 may not be justifiable, because ultimately you are averaging out your margins and you are placing a lot of reliance on the data in the year when there was no pandemic. So that's why some type of guidance should be brought in, or at least an analysis over a single year basis needs to be documented by the taxpayer in addition to the multiple year basis documentation. The single year basis documentation could be done post facto after a year, or maybe your transfer pricing study report could be updated post facto to prove that point. But this is something that you should keep in mind, and possibly a single year analysis is something that we would like to look under any other method as a method of benchmarking rather than categorizing it under TNMM, because the act now covers multiple year in the TNMM analysis. Another important aspects to look at is your receivables. With pandemic, I think most of the companies will have or will see fattening receivables with additional credit periods given by the companies to its debtors. But it's important at that point of time to also document, justify, otherwise there could be risk of delayed receivables and an at risk of adjustment, which is the interest adjustment on delayed receivables. If such a intent and such a change in factual scenario is not documented in the study as well as the intercorporate agreements. Moving forward, I think a very relevant aspect is on the loss-making companies, because we have seen that many a times loss-making companies have always been the point of discussion with the tax authorities, and most of the time in the orders, the tax authorities would not like to see the loss-making companies making their way in the comparability. However, justice has prevailed at the tribunal level, and there is actually no rule which states that in transfer pricing you cannot use loss-making companies. And if you think that a loss-making company really depicts the comparability situation which is there in your company, I think nothing stops you from taking those loss-making companies. In fact, it will only prove the point. But be rational, be balanced. Don't take all loss-making companies. Have a good mix of loss-making companies if it represents, and also the other side of it, which is maybe a super profit-making companies, and try to differentiate your comparable companies from you. So the answer lies in documentation and the way you do justice to the documentation, because going forward in e-assessment, so till today TP is not in e-assessments. From next year it is going in e-assessments. So once you go in e-assessments, the I would say reliance on verbal explanation is going to go down. So it's all about how you are able to justify it on a piece of document. So please justify it in the best possible manner when you are looking at loss-making comparables. Now let's tackle a very important aspect in the comparability, and that is on the COVID-related cost, which is incurred by the taxpayers. Now, ideally, it should be borne by whom? The cost ideally should be borne by the entity which has undertaken the risk assumption of that cost. Which means if you have already highlighted some amount of risk towards uncertainties, or risk of inventories, or risk towards employees or capacity utilization, such type of cost should be taken over by the associated enterprise who has taken over that particular risk, right? So initially, the cost could be taken over by one entity, which may not be responsible for it. But later on, it's important to undertake an analysis that that cost belongs exactly to which entity, and accordingly, the cost should be recharged to that particular entity. And I think this would be a major block in terms of tax litigation, or maybe a new kid on block in terms of pandemic, that the cost incurred by the taxpayer never belonged to him as far as the contractual obligations were concerned after doing a thorough review. So I think this is something in terms of care a taxpayer should take when you are looking at taking over the COVID related cost. Also, while you are undertaking a TNMM analysis, there could be an option to treat certain costs which are COVID related cost as exceptional cost. Now we need to have a fact by fact understanding here and take a position accordingly. I cannot really explain you and paint all the cost as COVID related cost in such a case. So a factual position taking is very relevant from a TNMM analysis point of view, and that is something that the businesses should look at from a thinking through and a thought process when we are looking at financial year 20 and financial year 21 onwards. Now, next point is more specific in terms of cost plus entities, where we are stating that in terms of a cost plus, whether we should look at exceptional cost being a part of the cost plus or not. Now, again, there could be certain positions to be taken here. There is a possibility that the COVID related cost could act as a pass through in a cost plus scenario, but the situation on pass through needs to be justified, needs to be documented and well reasoned out and accordingly taken as a position force, right? And the last point on cost is on the expenditure that most of the companies are incurring on the new COVID related costs, like setting up of offices at work from home scenario, certain donations which have been made which are voluntary, certain additional cost in terms of say PPE kits, etc., which has been specifically been built in. So this question is actually doing a lot of rounds of the newspaper also, because there has been a recent article in the newspaper which states that whether such type of COVID cost would qualify for a business expenditure. And the other side to it was whether such type of cost, when it is done for the employees, while employees are been given laptops, they are given routers, furniture, uh, whether such expenditures made for the employees be treated as perquisites in the hands of employees. So there has been a lot of discussion around, at least in the newspaper, around this, and any type of negative implications on such type of expenditures being treated as non-business expenditures could have dual and also triple tax impacts. First could be from a transfer pricing point of view, because you will be expected to earn markup on the cost which is getting disallowed in the income tax. So second is the income tax, and third is at the perquisite level, at the employees level. So uh, again, a position needs to be taken whether COVID related costs are getting covered under section 37, under section 17, as also section 92 of Income Tax Act. Right. Suraj, would you like to cover the contracts aspects as we discussed before, if you want to just pick it up?
Yes, Akshay. Yeah, thank you. So, hello everyone. So, we know that what is the importance of agreement in a transfer pricing arena, because it is one of the very important document which helps you to justify your function, assets and risk and the way you are doing business with your group entities. And that is why it is one of the factor of our global master file, which Akshay mentioned some time back. Also, the agreements has been given a very importance in the OECD or even in the BEPS, whether we have a separate action plan 9, which talks about the contractual risk vis-a-vis the actual risk, allocation of risk based on the contract. So it is very important while justifying your transfer pricing to maintain a contract, and the contract should be in line with what actually the functions, the entities functions and risk the entity is taken care of. So in this pandemic times, many times Akshay also put a reference that it is very important to put all the changes, all the change in cost allocation or change in the models, and we need to document it. And one along with the industry overview and global master file, a contract is also very important document which can help you to justify it to the tax authorities and the TP audit. So what we need to do based on the impact because of the pandemic impact on your business, we need to check the requirement of renegotiation or modification in the existing contract. And based on the future impact of the pandemic on your business, we need to negotiate with our group companies on the risk, what we can allocate to the reallocate or cost which we can reallocate it, and based on that we can modify the contracts. Further, we also need to, while modifying the contract, it is very important to check whether the impact of those modification will be short term or long term, so that accordingly we can make addendum to the current contract. And for example, if it is a short term contract, long term contract, for example, if it is a long term contract, we need to make sure that it is something which is not categorizing as a recharacterization of the group entity, else the additional compliances and the transaction need to be reported in the form 3CB, because even the recharacterization of the group entity based on the reallocation of the risk and the functions can tantamount to the international transaction, and it is also considered as a reportable transaction under the guidance note of in ICAI for Form 3CB. Further, that next point what we need to look at while renegotiating and modifying and getting into the addendum, that whether the impact of pandemic. So currently we are in 2021 and still the Form 3CB and the transfer pricing audit for 21 is not completed yet. So we also need to check the possibility of getting into a retrospective agreement instead of a prospective agreement, because the pandemic has already affected our financials for 2021, and the addendum and the modifications will also help us in the benchmarking activity, so that whatever risk and the reallocation we are doing in terms of cost, in terms of risk, will help us to pick up a more specific comparables, and that with the help of those comparables which can justify our transfer price for the financial year 2021 and the future years as well. So further in the discussion, Akshay mentioned about the receivables and the credit period. So it is very important to check in our scenario what is the credit period currently we are providing to the third party customers, and based on that whether we can, if there is a change. For example, before the pandemic situation it was 30 days, but now due to the pandemic situation many companies, houses have faced issue with the customer that instead of 30 days now the credit period has gone up to 60 days or 90 days. Based on the same, we can also modify the contracts for the short term or long term based on its impact on the industry, and we can change the credit period and in credit period in the contract and the time period for those credit period if you want to keep it for a short period of time. Similarly, while discussing, Akshay mentioned about reallocation and recharacterization. So agreement will play a very important role there, and putting that particular change in the characteristics and reallocation of cost. For example, if it is a cost-based entity and we have some exceptional cost, and which based on the discussion renegotiation, the group agreed to that they will consider those costs in my cost base. So my current contract will not help, because it may happen that those costs are not my operational costs, and because of that I will have a cash crunch at my entity. So that so based on this renegotiation and modification and addendum, we can include those costs as my cost base, and we can justify to the authorities what margins we are currently earning, and that will help us to benchmark and prove our transfer price. Further, the next
Suraj,
important.
before we go ahead, a small announcement. We have a question and answer or a Q&A tab live now. So we would be taking all the questions post the presentation is over. So I would urge the audience to post your questions in the Q&A section, and we would be more than happy to take it up at the end. Suraj, you may continue. Thank you.
The next important topic in the transfer pricing in the COVID times is the financial transactions. So in the start of the discussion, Akshay mentioned about the cash crunches was the group entities are facing due to the pandemics and the receivable time cycles and the additional investment which is required due to the pandemic. So it is very important to check the financial transaction, the modification of existing financial transaction or debt transaction, or getting into the new debt transaction with the group entities, or in case the group as at a global level is facing the cash crunch, what they can do, they can get into the guarantee transaction with the subsidiaries, so that the subsidiaries can get funds from the banks. Here, so first the modification of the existing debt arrangements. Here, what the HO, the group holding companies can do, they can provide some moratorium to the subsidiary companies, so that it will reduce their burden on payment of principal and interest for some period of time, for which they have the pandemic effect, and because of which they have the cash crunch at the local entity level. So this will help them to maintain their cash flow and move ahead with their operational activities very smoothly. So they can they can do both, or they can do either only the moratorium in the repayment of principal, or both they can do. Similarly, what they can do, they can convert this loan into the equity, so that the repayment and the liability of interest is done away, and they can get the in the longer period they can get the return what was expected out of the loan transaction. Secondly, in case currently the company don't have any debt, or the current fund, the current debt what the company have is not enough to fund their operational as well as the additional expenditure what is there because of the pandemic. For example, in the IT industry, due to the pandemic, there is a heavy additional cost on account of work from home, providing the desk and all the amenities to the employees. So that there is an additional fund requirement at the entities level, so the group can think about providing the additional debt to the subsidiaries, which can help them to maintain their operational activities. Here, one important point we need to look at while restructuring the current loan structure, or including an additional fund debt transaction in the group, is Section 94B, which is also a part of BEST project action point 4, which talks about the interest deduction at the time based on the EBITDA of the group. And due to the pandemic, the EBITDA of the group of the subsidiaries are getting impacted, which will indirectly affect the availability of deduction in terms of interest, because there is a cap, and because of the loss making scenarios, the companies are not able to claim the 100% deduction in terms of the interest cost which they are incurring currently. So the moratorium of interest, and this will help them to reduce the cash crunch also, because if there is a disallowance, that will make the additional burden of tax liability, tax outflow on the subsidies, which will indirectly result in the cash crunch. Therefore, this is very important to check while renegotiating or providing a moratorium or interest rate reduction, whether after reduction in the interest rate, whether the disallowance of 94B will be there or not, so that accordingly the cash outflow can be managed in terms of taxes. Further, in case the global operations are getting impacted due to the pandemic of the company, so what they can do, instead of providing funding directly, they can also provide a guarantee to the subsidiary company, so that they can offer a loan from a banks. Due to the pandemic, many countries have offered many opportunities to the business houses, so that they can get loans from the banks. So due to the guarantee provided by the HO, in case the subsidiaries credit rating is not enough to get those funds, the HO can provide the guarantee and subsidiaries can opt for that. So you have anything to add here?
No, Suraj, it's very well covered.
Sure. Okay. Moving to the next topic, that is advanced pricing agreement. Akshay, if you can cover, please.
Yeah, this is my personal favorite. So thanks, Suraj. I think it's very important for the taxpayers to understand what will happen to the APAs that they have already entered into, especially in the conditions of pandemic. And if you are thinking of going for an APA, or you are already in the process of negotiating with the APA authorities, what should be the stand that could be taken by you if you are getting impacted by the pandemic? Just to bring everybody on the same page, APAs or advanced pricing agreements is a regime which was brought in 2012, and APA is more of a proactive way of addressing the litigation, because as a taxpayer, you sit before the tax authorities and you plan your transfer pricing for the next 5 years, and also try to plan what has happened in the last 4 years. So you get a lot of certainty over 9-year period when you are going for an advanced pricing agreements. The regime of APA in India since 2012 has been considered as a success. More than 900, I think that figure would have gone above 1,000 now, have applied for advanced pricing agreements, and more than 350 have got executed. Many of them are unilateral, and there is a provision of also a bilateral APA in the Income Tax Act. Now, the important question to ask here now that we know what an APA is, that whether in the situation of pandemic, the agreement that you have signed for, whether the taxpayers are bound by the agreement or the APA in COVID times. The answer again is very simple. The adoption is not. The answer is yes, you are bound by that particular APA until and unless you have already factored in the implications and impact of pandemic in the years earlier. But I don't think any of the taxpayers would have envisaged such pandemic coming in 2019, late 19 and 20. So uh, I'm confident that there would not be any assumptions to that extent, but the taxpayers are still bound by the agreement which is signed with the tax authorities or the APA. If you think that by doing certain changes to your transfer prices, you are breaching any type of uh, conditions to the agreement, or as we call it, the critical assumptions to the agreement, that will entail to the breach of contract and which will fail the APA itself. A better way would be for the APAs that you have already entered into, if you need any type of change in the critical assumptions or changes in some or the other matter, it's important that you approach the tax authorities and apply for a revision of an APA under the current circumstances. The tax administration is taking such request, and it is also undertaking revision discussions, especially when it is on the signed APA itself. Now, once you are in the revision phase, the results coming out of the revision would apply in a way how it is then agreed between the tax authorities and the taxpayer. Now let's look at a situation where you have not applied for an APA, or maybe you are in the process of APA signing. In such a case, think through what type of impact the pandemic has had on to the entire business. Do a SWOT analysis again. Do a feasibility study again. I'm sure you would have done the feasibility study just before getting into an APA. And if you think that the results of that are trying to sway in a way that whatever has already been submitted to the tax authorities that might need revision, kindly go and renegotiate with the tax authorities. The tax authorities are being receptive to the COVID situations. I know of certain APAs where the tax authorities have also given COVID related reliefs. And ultimately, the aim is to proactively solve any type of future litigations that could be built in. So for non-signed APAs, my suggestion would be to go and renegotiate if you think that any of the situation impacts your transfer pricing. Now, I would like to extend this discussion also to a regime called as Safe Harbor, because it came absolutely around the same time, where the idea was for smaller companies to provide certain margins and markups so that the entire loop of audits and the litigation does not really come in in the way of doing business easily in India. So Safe Harbor regime was adopted, and such regime really covers say ITS companies, KPO, BPOs, maybe your automobile manufacturers, automobile component manufacturers, to say your corporate guarantees and financial transactions. So I think I have just a suggestion for the tax authorities here, that the current rate for Safe Harbor is still not been notified, because the Safe Harbor rates expired a year back. And it's important that when a taxpayer is planning for certain activities for transfer pricing in future, because TP is always going to be real time, the rates need to be prescribed upfront or at the start of the year and not at the end of the year, so that the taxpayer could plan his activities accordingly. So keep an eye on Safe Harbor. I have a feeling that the tax authorities might prescribe better rates of Safe Harbor this year, especially because of pandemic situation. Going back to APS, I just wanted to make a very important point here, that in case if you think that you have certain uncertainty in terms of earning revenues, in the way how it is envisaged in the APA, you can always try for a conditional approach in APA, where you can put certain conditions around growth. And you can say, if I grow at, or if my group company grows at a 10%, then I will earn a cost plus 18. Otherwise, I will earn a cost plus 15. So any type of conditional approaches could also be explored at the time of APA when you are going into negotiations. And that could be very specific to pandemic. Yeah. Moving forward, I think we can look at the Q&A section here. If anybody has any questions, more than happy to answer those. Suraj, do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, Akshay. So,
can you just post it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the first question, can we also consider only operational costs into consideration and leave aside the non-operational cost?
So ideally, we need more details on that, but just to stay on your question, most of the time in transfer pricing, we look at operational cost itself. A non-operational cost is ideally ignored for the purpose of transfer pricing if it is not having any impact on how the transfer prices were built in. So the focus from a TP point of view in TNMM is more operational rather than non-operational. Suraj, sorry, you are saying something.
Yeah. So there is an extension also to this question. Say, for example, if we are paying rental expenses as a permanent expenses, but is not actually helping in generating revenue, in such case, can we exclude this cost from our PLI consideration?
So the answer is, in easy terms, no, always. We need to build justification around it, and we also need to build a justification why you are incurring that rental cost. Because if you are incurring that rental cost, most of your other peers will also be incurring the rental cost, which is considered actually as overheads. So if you are going at a net margin level, any type of rents that you have, until and unless you are able to do a fixed cost adjustment, my suggestion to you would be that it will be very much considered as an operational cost until and unless we are able to build any justification around it. And if you are ignoring the rental cost in your case, we should also try and ignore the rental cost for the operational comparable companies. Suraj, any views on these?
No, Akshay, I think this is perfect because, yeah. The next question we have, whether the addendum can be made post facto so that they apply to financial year 2021 as well, because the financial year has already ended.
So I think, Suraj, yes, right? I mean, we have to, again, it's more of a factual question.
Yes.
But most of the documentation that would be done now would be post facto, and many a times the decisions are taken post facto and they're also applied post facto. So we need to actually look at the situation, but if you need a plain answer, it could be explored.
Yes. In view of current situation, there is almost no movement in the processing of API application by authorities. Do you see extension of date for authorities? I am asking this to understand the impact on those application pending for approval, although the period for which it is applied is getting over.
No, it's a practical difficulty. Now the APAs which are made and which is the first time APAs and where site visits are pending, those APAs are not getting addressed, but APAs where site visit is already done, if you are looking at only revision of APA, or if you are looking at, I would say, just renewing the APA, all conditions of renewing and all are getting fulfilled in terms of discussions with the APA authorities through online means. But only where site visit is pending, those cases are on hold, as per my experience.
Yes, Akshay. Yeah. That's all.
Any further questions?
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, I think we can still take questions as it come, but before we end and before we take any further questions, I would like to thank Swiss Indian Chamber of Commerce as well as Swiss Business Hub India for organizing this seminar. It's very unfortunate that the speakers from their side are not able to log in because of the technical glitch offered by Microsoft Teams. But I'm really thankful, and I'm really honored to speak on the platform by them. So thank you, Mr. Lad and Mr. Kudar, for extending this and bringing it to the audience at large. Suraj, any follow-up questions?
Yeah. So whether comprehensive income as per India's adjustment is to be considered as operating income or non-operating income?
Again, it's very factual, I guess. We'll have to get into details of the comprehensive income to give our thoughts on that. Suraj, you want to add anything there?
No, Akshay. I think, yeah. What will happen to the first time cases? Okay, so to the APA, we have one extended question here. What will happen to those first time cases?
So as I said, the first time cases will have to wait for the economy to open back. You can always make a case, you can always file for an APA, but I think it will take some time before the site visit could happen. The APA authorities will come back to you with in terms of questionnaire that they have, and you can reply it back electronically and also by filing a hard copy. But until and unless the site visit happens, the discussion further looks difficult. So all those site visits are on hold at this point of time. But I think that will soon start with the scare going down and pandemic now hoping that it is over or maybe close to getting over.
Okay. Yes, that's it all. Means we don't have any additional questions now.
Great. So thank you to everyone for attending this. I'm very glad that I was able to put forth some of our points to you, and I hope it will help you in doing business better, in understanding transfer pricing well. If you have any further follow-up questions or comments or would want to hear more like this from us, always feel free to write to us on the email ID which is provided to you on the screen. You can also reach out to us on our coordinates provided. Very happy to answer any of your questions and help you solve any transfer pricing issues that you have. So with this, I would like to end the presentation for today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.